Hi, friends and family. All right, tonight's book is The Sign of the Seahorse. It's got lots of good illustration. It says A Tale of Greed, The High Adventure in 2 Acts by Graeme Base, author of Animalia. This one has a map. It's a little bit long, so we'll see how we do here. The map says the mountains of the deep, the old reef, Reeftown, the withered plain, the groupers' hideout, the new reef, great continental shelf, soldier crab's camp, the poison, the groupers' reef. The Sign of the Seahorse, A Tale of Greed and High Adventure in 2 Acts. Cast: Pearl Trout, a waitress at the Seahorse Cafe. Finneus Trout, Pearl's brother and a member of the catfish gang. Mr. Trout, Pearl's father and proprietor of the Seahorse Cafe. That means owner. Bert, a corporal in the Soldiercrab army. Chopman Sea Grouper, a thief, con artist, and all-around baddie. A swordfish, the grouper's lieutenant. Ted and Stan, the grouper's sharks. The catfish gang, a motley mixture of rough diamonds. A sea snail and his family. A moray eel. The soldier crab commander. Other soldier crabs, combat lobster, an old toothless tiger shark, 3 angelfish, Kevin and the Kippers, a popular Reeftown dance band, various fine young fish and other reef folk, Strant's creepy creatures and deep seahorses, and 2 largely unnoticed shrimps. Prelude, The Disappearance of the Seahorses, in which a spreading poison comes to the old reef. So you see all the seahorses? And the seahorses mysteriously vanish. Above the ragged reefs they soared, exquisite and serene. Through slanting shafts of sunlight, tiny jewels of blue and green, performing little pirouettes, then sailing side by side. An ever-changing ballet danced upon the turning tide. Beneath a sweeping canopy of undulating hue, from wells of limpid turquoise to the deepest midnight blue, the seahorse ballet rose and fell. A silent symphony played out against the backdrop of a vast and fragile sea. Then came a day the sea went dark, the reef began to change, the coral gardens lost their glow, and the seaweed tasted strange. The shifting ocean currents brought a slowly spreading blight, and every single seahorse simply vanished overnight. That's not good. Says, Scene 1, the Seahorse Cafe, in which our heroine, Pearl, falls in love with Corporal Bert. The evil grouper pays an unwelcome visit to the Seahorse Cafe. It's a big book. Let me see if I can get it in here. The Seahorse Cafe was the place where fine young fish would meet to spend the evening dancing to the latest Reeftown beat. The rock was hard, the drinks were soft, the chairs were in between. In short, the Seahorse was the place in which one should be seen. The cafe sat upon a knoll above the ebb and flow, unblemished by the poison that was taking hold below. The band was hot, the place was cool, the atmosphere was just right, and all the fish would bop and hop and boogie through the night. The owner of the cafe was a fine, upstanding trout who had a lovely daughter and a son who seemed a lout. She waitressed at the cafe and was cheerful, quick, and bright, but he had joined catfish gang and stayed out late at night. Despite the shock of spiky hair and earrings in his snout, young Finneus was really just a normal teenage trout. The catfish gang looked tough and mean, no manners, no respect, but deep inside they meant no harm and dressed up for the effect. The daughter, we shall call her Pearl, would often stop and flirt with all the local soldier crabs until she noticed Bert. He looked the part, a clipped mustache, 2 eyes, 8 boots, 1 glove, and a pearl, who couldn't help herself, fell helplessly in love. So this must be Pearl and the crab. The fateful night when Pearl and Bert first fell for one another, and she gazed deep into his eyes, first one stalk, then the other. There came a crash, somebody screamed, and in the doorway stood the grouper and his henchfish. It was clear they meant no good. The grouper was an ugly fish, with wicked piggy eyes, possessed of bloated appetites, as witnessed by his size. His pinstriped suit was tailor-made, complete with matching tie, exactly what the well-dressed crook was wearing that July. A savage-looking swordfish stood a little to his right, the kind of thug you wouldn't want to come across at night. His sidekicks were a pair of sharks and with dubious IQs, who dressed in stovepipe trousers and wore pointy two-tone shoes. The grouper owned the place next door, a sleazy rundown bar where low-life slugs and wintle traps made bootleg caviar. He bought a lot of property in last October's crash and ran the sort of businesses where clients paid in cash. The grouper said, "You punks take heed. This warning is for you. Stay out of this here cafe, or your swimming days are through. I own the only bar in town that's gonna jump and jive. You come back here again and you ain't gonna stay alive." His bodyguards slicked back their hair and circled around the crowd as if to dare the customers to voice their thoughts aloud. Then, roughing up a sea snail who was less than half their height, the sharks rejoined their master and stepped out into the night. Down at the wreck. It's kind of hard to hold this book because it's so big. Down at the wreck in which the catfish gang came to face with the grouper sharks, the soldier crabs arrive in the nick of time, and the Corporal Bert pens a note to his true love Pearl. The catfish gang were hanging out down by the local wreck, demolishing the rigging on the starboard upper deck. When Stan and Ted, the grouper sharks, perchanced to happen by, the catfish leapt down from the ship and faced them eye to eye. Young Finneus and furious, he swam right up to Ted. "You sharks are nothing more than stupid villains," Finney said. "You think you're big heroes, rough enough, defenseless snails. Well, let's see how you look with a catfish claw marks down your tails." The sharks revealed their wicked teeth and grinned a wicked grin. It looked as though a fearsome fight was shortly to begin. But suddenly there was the sound of a fast approaching feet. A company of soldier crabs came marching down the street. They rounded up the catfish and informed them of their rights. while Stan and Ted moved quietly away from the lights. The area was cordoned off. All trouble spots were manned. The soldier crab commander had the crisis well in hand. "You catfish are a rotten lot," the crab commander said, his buggy eyes surveying them from well above his head. "I ought to have your whiskers. We can do without your kind. Now clear off, every one of you, before I change my mind." See him over here? With calculated slowness and impertinent remarks, the catfish gang retreated, looking round them for the sharks. But Stan and Ted had disappeared that moment things got hot. For villains they most surely were, but stupid they were not. Oh, look at this. Here we have crabs. Soldier crabs. Let's see what it says. When all the members of the gang had disappeared from view, the colonel said, "Attention, men! A message has come through. A creeping plague is killing off all the coral, gray and dead. Our orders are to find the source from whence this poison spread." The army was to leave at once. All crabs were on alert. And at this news, a little gasp escaped from Corporal Bert. For in his heart a crack appeared, a soulful, lovesick pain, to think he might never see his true love Pearl again. The colonel gave the order, and the soldiers wheeled about. But as they left, Bert lagged behind, his mind a sea of doubt. He longed to see his darling Pearl before he went away, and tell her all those tender things that parting lovers say. Just then he heard a rustle in some bushes up ahead, and from a dump of seaweed poked a spiky mane that said, "Hey Bert, it's Finny over here. I'm hiding in the weed." "Dear Finneus," said Corporal Bert, "you're just the fish I need. The soldier crabs are leaving in an hour, and we must depart. But will you take a note to Pearl for me, for my aching heart? Tell Pearl I shall miss her every hour of every day." So Finny promised Bert he'd take the note without delay. The other catfish reappeared as Bert marched out of view and held a general meeting as to what the gang should do. "Those sharks are getting way too big. Let's cut them down to size." And so they formed a plan to catch their rivals by surprise. There he is, give him the note. Give to Pearl. There's the pictures. Let's see. Back at the Seahorse Cafe, in which the unscrupulous grouper acquires the Seahorse Cafe. The Pearl gives Finny a message before embarking on a long journey into the unknown. Back at the Seahorse Cafe, there was tension in the air. The seahorse Fins akimbo stood behind the grouper's chair. The grouper watched Pearl's father through a pall of acrid smoke, then leant across the table, downed some caviar, and spoke. "I'm a very patient fish, in fact, of which I'm proud, along with every quality with which I am endowed. But patience, as a virtue, has its limits, you'll agree. I want this contract settled by the time I count to 3. He stood and thrust a pen toward his victim's tired fin. Pearl's father sighed and signed. The poor old trout had given in, and so the grouper came to the legal licensee of Reeftown Seahorse Cafe for $1.93. The grouper turned towards them as he headed for the street. "I trust you are aware of certain costs you'll have to meet. The taxes and the legal fees, expenses underlined. You'll find them in the fine print of the contract you just signed." There's Pearl. The sound of wicked laughter was still hanging in the room, an eerie echo adding to the general air of gloom. when through the door burst Finneus and handed Pearl the note, who paid no heed to grammar and disclosed what Bert had wrote. My darling Pearl, I must away, for duty both require. I sally forth to unknown parts and dangers dark and dire, but through all kinds of peril, naught shall cause my harm or hurt, as long as you still love me. Signed, your ever-loving Bert. Oh, Finneus, what shall I do? Poor Pearl began to weep, for we must also leave tonight and face the ocean's deep. Then Pearl told Brother Finny of the cafe's awful fate, another grouper's diners full of sea slugs, eels, and bait. The dreadful news hit Finny like an anchor from above. To think that villain owned that place he'd come to know and love. I'm not going with you, Pearl. I have a job to do. That thieving thug has bitten off far more than he can chew. With that he turned and made to go, but Pearl called out his name. Dear Finny, what you did for Bert, please do for me the same. Take Bert this note so he may find the trail that I shall make, a secret path of seahorse signs to mark the road we take. As Finny left to join the gang, a sea snail trundled past with belongings on its back. Behind him came his wife and kids, who numbered 24, and as they passed, the sea snail's voice came wafting through the door. This place we used to call our home has really gone to pot, and now, on top of all the rest, the reefs begin to rot. When sharks are free to terrorize a poor defenseless snail, I'd say the situation has gone well beyond the pale. Pearl watched the sea snail catch his breath beneath the cafe lights and grumble to himself about the lack of shellfish rights, then called to him, We too must travel roads we do not know. Pray tell, where are you headed, for we know not where to go. He told her of an ad he'd seen in last week's Seaweed Mail about a distant coral reef with building lots for sale. Outstanding value, close to shops, all coral fresh and clean. It sounded like a bargain, so he'd bought one sight unseen. The thought of a healthy coral flanked by seaweed lush with long convinced Pearl and her father they should join the sea snail throng. So turning off the flashing lights and slamming shut the door, they boldly went where no saltwater trout had gone before. This is called The Grouper's Hideout. Thanks for watching Grandma Alicia's Storytime. Remember to subscribe, and if you feel like it, you can comment your favorite book below, or tell us what you thought about the book we just read. Thank you.